Hello, I'm Mark and welcome to my channel. And welcome back. The episode prior to this was my introduction, in which I just went through a lot of the books that are currently off camera that I am reading. I read very slow and I tend to go around in succession with books. Lord of the Rings. And I'm currently at the Sign of the Prancing Pony. I've read this book quite a number of times, not as much as, say, Christopher Lee would have done in his lifetime. I think he read it every year. The last time I read this would have been about 5 years ago, and I struggled to complete it. I think I got as far as Ben Guri... Ben, is that the right name? I forgot now. Just before we get to Minas Tirith with the Rohirrim and whatever. And I just stopped at that point. Prior to that, I'd read it all the way through. Something prompted me to reread it, but looking at it differently. And I don't know why it took so long for me to get hold of it, but I came across a video that was looking at the movies, the wonderful Lord of the Rings trilogy. And in it, there is an argument that the real hero is Samwise Gamgee. And in fact, he's the one that kind of maneuvers things along. It's almost though he's, I don't know, some kind of force. And when I remember the book before I purchased it again to reread it, it triggered a memory that as you're going through, you get this sense that there are outside forces that are ready and willing to help the Fellowship go along. And that's certainly been picked up again as I continue reading. And one thing that has struck me is that it's admitted that Sam is the guy who organises Merry and Pippin and Fatty Bolger to get things going, to get Frodo out of the Shire. The Shire, at the very beginning, really is writ large. And there's only a little bit of Gandalf there. He comes and goes. And at times, if you didn't know the story, you'd think, okay, I know it's centred on Frodo, but the writing isn't always centred on Frodo at this point. And you get a lot of people commenting in the pub who have got nothing to do with the story beyond the Shire. They're an exposition to give, well, in this case, tell the reader a little bit about what people think of those who live Bagshot Row. So you get Samwise's father and so on. And if they were filmed in the way in which they're written, they would really work very well. It's very cinematographic, the writing at this point. And the story it unfolds, as most people know, at a stately pace. We don't, as in the movie, leave the Shire and then suddenly get to Bree. You go through the Green Hill country, you meet elves. Again, this force that comes out of nowhere, just at the right time, to assist the hobbits. And then they get into Buckland, and they're at the house at Crick Hollow, and then they go into the Old Forest, and of course it's Old Man Willow, which is not in the movie, and then Tom Bombadil. And you just definitely get this feeling with Tom. You know, the fact that he's not affected by the ring, and he has to save them from the Barrow Wights, takes them to the edge of his domain, but he can't go any further. He won't literally go out that. It's almost as though he's tied down to that particular part of the world. But he is a force for good. I never picked up on that when I was reading it for the first time. I read it too quickly, allowed things to unfold, scene after scene, and before I knew it, I was literally beyond the Misty Mountains, and all that was prologue. The past is prologue, as I say in The Tempest. So it is a much more enjoyable read, I would argue, when you read it slowly. you take more in. That was actually a nice little map there of Bree. And so on. So it's going to be a long time possibly before I do an update on Lord of the Rings. It's a wonderful story. And Tolkien, because of his supreme ability to world build, you really feel as though you're there. But the pace is slow. And I'll be interested to revisit the part of the book. I mean, this is the 3 books put together as one volume. So it's, it's large. But the bit where the story breaks up and you follow Sam and Frodo and Smeagol for one large portion, while the story abandons Merry and Pippin and the Rohirrim or whatever, and they're done separately. Where in the films they're spliced together, scene after scene. It'll be interesting to go down that route again and feel the rhythm, which, when I was a younger man, I never picked up. The last time I read that book, I had not written my own books. So I think I've gained an appreciation of what's involved and what the author is trying to achieve. So apart from the theme of outside forces helping, you also get this underlying sense that the hobbits are obviously isolated in this almost semi-paradise, unlike anything else that they're going to come across. Is that legitimate? Does it fit in with the world? Well, I think in the hands of a lesser writer, no. It would be a bit of a jolt. But what he does do as a writer, Tolkien, you get the impression through his maps and the fact he talks about fields and rivers and brooks and forests, well tended. There's an economy here, and there is large open land devoted to farming, tilling the field, because they have to get food from somewhere. And very rarely in a fantasy novel is that put in. It's like Mad Max. It's a film that's based on the idea that they're all after oil because they're driving cars, but no one's growing any food or wheat or anything like that. So that doesn't happen with Tolkien. The world building really works, and you get this sense of this economy so far. The other thing I could talk about at this stage are the hobbits. I don't think I'd picked up before what they looked like, really. And of course the movies have come along. I first started reading Lord of the Rings in the 1970s, early 80s, and read it 2 or 3 times before the movies came along, at least. And now we see the hobbits as they appear in our mind because of the movies. Well, I tend to. In fact, Merry and Pippin in the book, I have to imagine the actors to make sense of where they're at and their personalities. But their appearance, and the same with Gandalf, isn't really what you think. They're darker skinned, they're brown, they're supposed to be the colour of nuts. And the way in which they dress is, in my mind, different to what I see has been developed from the movie. So that's an interesting thing. And of course that's down to the fact that when we read, it's in our own heads, isn't it? So I was jolted by that. And certainly Gandalf, with the fact that he wears a scarf and his eyebrows are over the bridge or the brow of his hat. I don't get that sense with the film because he's got a big floppy hat. He's got a wizard's hat. So the bit that peeks out on the hat won't be that big. I wonder what it would be really like. For some reason, I think of the Mongol steppe riders with their hats. Got this unusual hat where a person's eyebrows are sticking out. Could go beyond the brim. So we all pick up on different things, don't we, when we're reading? That's what I've picked up on. And this gentle flow and this force that's helping them. And then the beauty of the land as it's unfolding. Is there a sense of dread there? No, at this stage. I can't say there is, because it is a book for children, supposedly. Even in the Barrow-wights, slightly not a sense of dread, a more hindrance. But still a interesting element in the book, and potentially I can see why Peter Jackson did not include it. So, there you go. Lord of the Rings. I don't think there's much else to say at this time. I do, if for whatever reason this has any worth whatsoever, which I don't think it does, but I would say read it. I'll give a recommendation. You don't need the fancy, I just treated myself, but you don't need this. Just get a paperback. And let the story unfold. And for myself, if you're like me, think, what's the motivation of the things here? Not just the fact that they've got to go to get rid of this ring, but all the other people. Why they're helping, who's helping, and why. That's an interesting thing to consider. Well, until next time, and the future one on Lord of the Rings. Take care.